2012 was a good year for the Philippines. The leadership of President Aquino III has steered the country on the road to sustained economic growth which is expected to be among the top in Asia. The President's crusade for good governance paid off with the removal of former Chief Justice Renato Corona, former President and now Congresswoman Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is now in detention facing charges for plunder and electoral sabotage. There were tragedies brought about by typhoons due to climate change, but in the face of all these trials, the President led our people and nation to be one in facing the daunting task of building a nation we truly deserve. And joining us tonight to review the year that was for the country is PCCO Secretary Sonny Coloma. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Robert.
Sir, looking back at 2012, what was the most significant accomplishment of President Aquino?
The President has fulfilled the most significant aspects of his social contract with the Filipino people, and by keeping faith with them, by fulfilling his promises, the people have reciprocated in terms of giving him very high trust ratings. We have seen the strengthening of our democracy by fair enforcement of the law. This was demonstrated to its fullest extent when no less than the Chief Justice was impeached, tried, and convicted, and there was widespread public approval of this event, which just goes to show that if a leader keeps faith with the people will also reciprocate in terms of their trust in him.
So citing the economy for one, the 7.1% GDP growth for the third quarter, how will this translate to inclusive growth to benefit especially the poor?
What we need to appreciate, Robert, is not just the 7.1% third quarter growth, because in comparison to the third quarter growth last year, which was not very high, what should be appreciated is the sustained good growth curve that we've been able to achieve for the entire year, which is a takeoff from our performance in 2011, the first full year of the Aquino administration. What should also be appreciated is that the government of President Aquino has already laid the infrastructure for a new governance superstructure and also for a new atmosphere of confidence and trust in the country, as well as a high morale among our people. That, I think, is the most significant gain that we have achieved in the year about to end.
So as you have mentioned, the removal of former Chief Justice Renato Corona and former President Arroyo now facing charges of electoral sabotage and plunder, how does this translate to the President's commitment of good governance?
Well, it's one of the pillars of his social contract to establish justice in Philippine society. And if people see that justice is applied equally to the high and mighty as well as to the poor and lowly, then people will have confidence that this is a system that is fair, a system that works, and a country that where the government exists for the greatest good of the greatest number.
So the passage of the sin tax measure and the reproductive health bill in Congress, how significant is this in relation to the partnership of the President with Congress in passing key legislations?
One of the interesting comments I heard during the signing ceremonies for both laws came from representatives of civil society and the business sector, and that is the comment that it would have been very difficult to imagine the signing ceremonies taking place in another administration, meaning the signing ceremony for the national budget within the same year that the budget was presented, so that it can be enacted and implemented on the very first year, budget year. Number two, the sin tax reform law, which was approved and signed after many years of lingering in the halls of Congress due to strong lobbying from vested interest groups. We were able to pass it over and above the strong lobby of the vested interests, and this goes to show that even our legislature is responding to to the clamor for genuine reform and for social change. And so goes for the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Bill that would have been very difficult to pass in previous years. In fact, it took almost 15 years for the entire legislative process to unfold and to be completed. These are signal gains that have been achieved because we have laid the infrastructure for good governance, Robert.
So this year we've seen a lot of good news with regards to the economy as well as the road to peace, but there were also trials and tragedies brought about by natural calamities. Sir, would you say that now the government is better prepared at all to handle all kinds of emergencies?
We have put in place many important equipment as well as structures and systems. We now have a national, regional, provincial, city, municipal, and barangay risk reduction and management structure, where the local government executives at the grassroots level are the ones taking the lead in warning our people of danger and of bringing them to safety and of presiding over relief and rehabilitation efforts. But that is not enough because, as we have seen in the case of Sendong last year and Pablo this year, the hardest hit due to these calamitous events brought on by severe climate change, the hardest hit are the least, the last, and the lost of society. These are the poorest members of Philippine society that we are also trying to uplift through the social development programs of the government. So these challenges are being faced hand in hand with all of the reform programs that are being implemented, Robert.
So by all in all, do you see a lot of better changes now from the past years on how we handle tragedies, better prepared right now, better coordination with the different agencies?
The government sector has improved significantly in its capacity to respond not just to emergencies but also to rebuild after calamity has stricken. But what needs to be improved upon is the awareness level of the people and their willingness also to cooperate with the government. This was demonstrated in the case of Pablo, because it hit two provinces that had not been visited by calamity for nearly 100 years, and these are Davao Oriental and Compostela Valley. In the case of Compostela Valley, we may have to study the possibility of moving them to safer grounds, and this would include thousands of families, and this will not be an easy thing. So the harder part of the rehabilitation effort convince them that they cannot return to the danger zones that they had previously inhabited.
So now moving on, sir, you have traveled with the president overseas several times. You must be proud that leaders of other countries right now are taking notice of his leadership and accomplishments. What are they saying about our president?
They see a leader who is decisive, they see a leader who is thoughtful, who is intelligent, and at the same time able to navigate the challenging waters of international diplomacy, literally and figuratively, by dint of his serenity and grace under pressure. I saw this in the concrete during the ASEAN summit in Cambodia in November, where he was able to stand up and call attention to inaccuracies that were stated by the presiding officer of the summit. And this also encouraged the other countries to be more assertive and toward making this summit meaningful conferences for asserting the rule of law in international diplomacy.
So
I believe that is one of the signal achievements of our president in his foreign trips.
Yes. So looking now at the president's trust ratings, they continue to remain high. In the past, by midterm, past presidents have recorded low or negative numbers. Why do the numbers continue to rate high for President Aquino?
The performance and trust ratings of the President are in 80s, Robert. If we look at the demographic profile of our people, about 70% are in the poorest strata of Philippine society. The President cannot get those high ratings if the poorest of the poor in our society do not believe that he is sincere or do not see that he is making earnest efforts to get them out of poverty. I think that is the key to the sustained public confidence and support for the President. That our people, margins, are people who are still suffering from poverty, are able to discern a glimmer of hope and trust that the President is doing everything possible to bring them out of poverty.
Sir, and a final word from you, sir, as we end 2012 and move on to 2013. Sir?
Well, we need to be more dedicated, hardworking, and devoted to the task of nation building. What we have done in the past 2 years, while this may be exemplary, cannot be the basis for complacency because there is so much more to be done. We have to build stronger democratic institutions that will survive the vagaries of time and changes in leadership. And this calls for our people themselves to be empowered, to be aware, to be conscious of their individual roles in nation building. That is what we need to fortify in the coming years, Robert.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for joining us tonight. That was Secretary Coloma of the PCOO. Thank you, sir, and Happy New Year.